Hi, everybody. It's such a joy to be with you. So, the last time that I had the privilege of being the teacher in this really holy gathering, it was the waning hours of Yom Ha'atzmaut, of Israeli Independence Day. And I make my home generally in Israel. Although today I'm joining you from Southern California, where I was born and raised. And here we are on the eve of American Independence Day. And so, what we're going to do together today, we're going to study a little bit of this week's parasha together, Parashat Chukat. Um, and specifically, we're going to use a teaching from the Talmud about this week's parsha that is going to offer us some beautiful wisdom that I hope will infuse for those of us here in the gathering who are American, who will in that can maybe will infuse our commemoration of the 4th of July with some additional meaning and perspective. And really, what we're going to do together today is build some resourcing, support our own resilience, because it's a hard time to be a human being on planet Earth. And for a lot of us, it's a hard time to be an American. And so we're going to see if we can let the Parsha speak to us a little bit in that way. So, so yes, Sam, I'll just say a word about Awakened Body. So I've spent my whole adult life working in the terrain of spirituality and Jewish spirituality, but my focus at Awakened Body is on wellness and on supporting folks to feel vitally alive, to help us build a sense of resilience. And we really need that now more than ever. And this week's Parsha, Parshat Chukat, we actually have beautiful, the Parsha speaks to this approach that I get to take with my clients day by day, session by session, which is using the body as a tool to draw resourcing, to build our own sense of resilience so that we can greet every new day as the blessing that it is. So I think I'm going to go ahead right now and share my screen and we'll study a little bit of Torah together. And then we'll use this Torah here to help inspire and guide our practice. So I want to show you three snapshots from the Parsha, and then we're going to just take a little bit of guidance from the Talmud, from Masechet Ta'anit, as a way of inspiring our sit today. So a couple of things happen in this week's Parsha. First, in Parshat Chukat, we read about the death both of Miriam and of Aaron. And these were two profound leaders in our collective Jewish memory. But also, if we think about the particular circumstance that our ancestors found themselves in, wandering through the desert, and we read, they lament this again in this week's Parsha. Egypt was tough because they were slaves, but it was certain. There, they knew where their next meal was coming from. They knew where they were laying down their head at night. And so it wasn't necessarily the life that a slave might have chosen for himself, but it had certainty. Whereas the essence of wandering in the desert is the epitome of it's the wilderness. It is the profound sense of unknown. And I think that if we were to take a poll right now, some of us might identify with that sense of unknown right now in America. That we're just living in a time where wherever you are across the political spectrum, we are living in a time of profound change. Some of us might call it chaos, and other of us might call it, radical potential, but it is the opposite of this sort of fixed certainty. And so we can identify with where the Jewish people were as they were wandering in the desert. And so you can imagine yourself wandering in the desert, moving through this place of uncertainty. And in one parsha, we have the death of two leaders. And the source that I'm going to read for us in a moment from the Talmud is going to tell us that each of these leaders had a miracle that was given to the Jewish people in their honor and was a tool for resourcing. And it's those miracles that we're going to work with in our sit. So we'll get there in a minute. The third snapshot that I want to show you from this week's Parsha is that this Parsha is a Parsha of healing. It's in this week's Parsha that we meet the snake that is part of the center of, if you a picture, the insignia that all healers wear. There is a snake that wraps around what I would call the tree of life. Others might call it a symbol of a cross, right? And that symbol of the healing snake comes from this week's Parsha, where there is a plague that maybe has something to do with snakes, although seraphim are also a name for angels. There's something going on here where snake bites happen, and Moses gets the instruction to create a healing symbol, a healing amulet, and healing comes. So we know on a big picture level that this week's Parsha is about healing in some way. So with that, I want us to take, we're going to let the words of Masechet Ta'anit, this is an excerpt from the Talmud, we're going to let them be our springboard for our sit. You'll notice I'm going to offer us this piece of text, and then you'll see you can already start to begin. We're going to use this text as a way of transitioning into a nice, healthy, I'm gonna be good and quiet for about 10 minutes. But we're going to take the inspiration for our seated silent practice today from the imagery in this text. So this is an excerpt from the Talmud, but it's teaching us about this week's Parsha and specifically about the death of Aaron and of Miriam. So Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Yehuda, says, three good sustainers rose up for the Jewish people during the exodus from Egypt. They are Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. So I want to invite us already to take the Talmud's language here. What a beautiful way of thinking of a leader. When we ask the question, what is a leader? What do we need from our leaders? Leaders are sustainers. They are meant, their function, one of their functions is meant to help us find a sense of safety, of certainty, of security as we traverse the unknown. So three good sustainers rose up for the Jewish people as they wandered through the desert: Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. And three good gifts were given from heaven through their agency. And these are they: the well of water, the pillar of cloud, and the manna. He elaborates. The well was given to the Jewish people in the merit of Miriam. The pillar of cloud was in the merit of Aaron, and the manna in the merit of Moses. When Miriam died, the well disappeared, as it is stated, and Miriam died there. And it says thereafter in the next verse, and there was no water for the congregation, but the well returned in the merit of both Moses and Aaron. So here, Masechet Ta'anit is summarizing for us this moment of crisis that maybe we can identify with as Americans, that here we're moving through this time of uncertainty. And yet, thank God for the Jewish people in the desert, there were these three pillars, three leaders. Each leader had an associated miracle. And we're going to focus today on the miracle associated with Aaron and with Miriam. So if you've studied Parashat Chukat, you know that the crisis of no water, often when we open this parsha, that's the crisis that we study together, and we know that it has long-term ramifications specifically for Moshe. But for today, we are going to focus on Aaron and his miracle of the clouds of glory that were above the people as they moved through the desert, and Miriam and her miracle, which was the well of water, that when she died, the well dried up. And yet then we know from the Parsha that it comes back. And so you can see this sweet little excerpt from the Parsha too. There is a song to the well. Once, this is why the rabbis say it came back. Then the Israelites sang the song, "Spring up, O well, sing to it, the well which the chieftains dug." How beautiful that we have a song to the well in the Parsha. So I want to invite you now to begin to transition and to get ready to move into seated silent practice. And in the inspiration of Miriam and Aaron, we're going to be with these two images. So I'm going to invite us to tune in to the reality of the clouds of glory above and to the well of water below. I'm going to invite us to tune into both. And then as we move into practice, I'm going to encourage you to choose one and to work with the one that's really resonating with you. So let's all take a moment and let's take a comfortable seated position. And if we're sitting on a chair or a couch or a stool, whatever we're using to support our physical body, we just want to let it do what it's designed to do. So I feel the firmness of the cushion or chair beneath the lower half of my body, and I rest my weight there. Unless you're sitting cross-legged, if your feet can touch the floor, we're just feeling the ground beneath our feet. And I would encourage you to gently close the eyes. And on the next inhalation, feel the spine lengthen. Feel the crown reach towards the ceiling and the sky above. And on the next exhalation, just feeling a sense of ease wash over the body. And as you breathe in, I invite you to imagine, use your imagination to picture clouds of glory somewhere up above your head. An inhalation that invites the spine to lengthen, the crown stretches up towards these clouds, which are meant to make us feel safe and protected. What would it feel like to know that I could just glance upward and actually see God's protection there? And whenever it's natural for you, on your next exhalation, exhale and feel your breath exiting out through the tail. And call to mind an image of a well below. We learn in the teachings around this week's Parsha that there was a well of water that was given as a gift to the Jewish people, nothing more life-sustaining than water. And just considering what would it feel like anytime I felt depleted, low energy, that I could tune in to the energy below and know that there was a well there that I could scoop up resourcing whenever I needed. So the clouds of glory, a miracle in honor of Aaron, and the well in the desert, a miracle in the honor of Miriam. I want to encourage you now to pick one. There's no right or wrong, but we're going to begin to transition now into a period of silent practice. And you're choosing either I am drawing up resourcing from below on the inhalation, feeling a sense of vitality traveling up the spine. And on the exhale, I soften. Or if you're a person who tends to look for hope from above, then you're working with that image of the clouds of glory inspired by Aaron. And in the same way, on the inhale, I'm drawing down, resourcing from above, feeling it pour into my body through the crown, and softening with a sense of ease on the exhale. And you might allow the image of one miracle or the other to fill the mind's eye. Feeling myself resourced in spite of anything that's going on all around. My body is plugged in, and on the inhale, I can bring in vitality. And on the exhale, I soften with a sense of ease. And if you notice the mind wandering, you can again picture the miracle you're working with so that you can inhale and draw in resourcing. Exhale and soften with a sense of ease. Staying with your breath and with your practice, I invite you just to notice how large and spacious the body feels. So if you've been working with the image of clouds of glory above, or this depth of living waters in the well below, just noticing how the body comes to take up the space of the cosmos, and how this spaciousness, it is the opposite of how we can sometimes feel when things feel out of control around us. That if we think about the Jewish people when they were slaves, to be a slave is to be stuffed into a tiny place, a tiny box. And by contrast, with this type of practice, where we're centered in faith and drawing down or drawing up resourcing from above or below, we can feel a sense of ease and spaciousness in the very same terrain that in a different perspective might feel overwhelming. shifts to become for us full of potential. And so as we bring our practice now to a close, just making a mental imprint of how it feels to be resourced and spacious, and acknowledging that this terrain is here for us. And as you're ready on the next inhalation, I invite you to fill up, come back with us to the here and now. And on your next exhalation, you can let the eyes flutter open. And I'll hand it back to Sam, who can close for today.
Thank you for that beautiful practice, Sara. And as we close, I was notified by Harry that I was incorrect. In fact, we do have a sponsor today, Sara Writer Band, in honor of the birthday last month of Sara's inspiring Chavruta Shireen Kravitz, who is Sara's childhood neighbor. And a beautiful way to continue being in relationship as the years roll on. And we'll turn now to Mourner's Kaddish. So if you are reciting Kaddish for a loved one, a friend, anyone, welcome to put the name or names of those people in the chat so we can honor their memory. I invite you to rise with me in body and or spirit. Those who are not reciting Kaddish are invited to offer their compassionate, kind presence and to respond.
I think she works in the regular market. She's filling in. I've seen her before.
So again, if you're reciting Kaddish, you can come off of mute. And we'll begin in Yitgadal.
Yikadal v'yikadash me Rabbi
Amen.
Adi v'achiyotei v'yivnei malkutei v'chayachom Elohim Malav Zman Kariv
Israel.
Amal
Amen.
Shemei Rabbi
Amen. Amen.
Yitadar V'Lev Yitalam Yikudishabri Ela Min Kumar Zavishira Tam Shmita V'nechar Mama Rabba V'Shamay V'Kalei Yalko Yisrael Yamav Yimama V'Shalom Mama Rabba V'Shamay Yisrael
Shalom.
Amen.
Amen.
May the memories of
Amen.
us inspire us to act of justice, compassion, wisdom, and kindness. And let us say Amen. So if you need to leave us now, please be well, take good care. We send you off with warm blessings. And anyone who wants to stick around for about 15 minutes is welcome to do so for some questions and responses with Sara. Of course, if you have a question, please place it in the chat and preface it with the word question in caps, which will just help us find those questions. And as is the practice of my friend and teacher, Rabbi Mark Margolius, Sara, I'm just going to summarize what I heard and reflect it back to you. And of course, if there's any refinement you need to offer or want to offer, you're welcome to do so. But I found that teaching really, really compelling. And what I heard was that, Egypt is, even though it's a tight place, a difficult place, a place of tremendous travail, it's predictable. We know what to expect from day to day, even if it's a miserable existence. And there's some comfort in that. And yet, when the people actually leave Egypt and they're out in the Midbar in the wilderness, it's really a very unpredictable place. It's wide open. And on the one hand, it's full of possibility. it's pregnant with possibility. On the other hand, it's also quite groundless and scary. And so it was really a resource for the people to have these miracles that God performed in honor of these three wonderful spiritual leaders, Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. And it was so beautiful how you use the imagery of the pillar of cloud, which God gave the Jewish people in honor of Aaron, and the well, which God gave the Jewish people in honor of Miriam, and really thinking about how we might actually use that imagery in our meditation to help us resource ourselves during these times that feel like a wilderness, right? And in their groundlessness and the fact that there's so much uncertainty and instability right now. And how, when we do that, sometimes even if we had been feeling kind of tight and narrow in the body can actually begin to expand, right? Into, perhaps I'm adding commentary here, but even
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
infinity, right? And that can just provide us with a sense of profound spaciousness and ease and resource. So did I get that right, Sarah?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Great. So I sometimes I like to offer some questions of my own before turning to the participants. And one thing I noticed in my practice is that the imagery itself, was really helpful in kind of directing the contours and the directionality of the energy. It's actually coming into my body. Can you say a little bit more about how that works for you, and kind of how, in some ways, that might be a little bit different than a traditional mindfulness practice where we're just kind of observing the moment to moment nature of our experience rather than actually trying to cultivate particular images or energetic qualities in the body?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. It's a question that gives me the space to also talk a little bit about what I do at Awakened Body. So at Awakened Body, the energetic map of the body that I use when I'm working one-on-one with clients is the Kabbalistic tree of life, comes from Kabbalah. And so from the perspective of Kabbalah, and this is a little bit different than what we know of as conventional mindfulness practice. Um, for Kabbalists, the claim that we are made in the image of God means many things, but it's also literal. On some literal level, we quote unquote look like God. Now, of course, we're not speaking in the world of the 3D and the physical, but that the way that I find it clearest to articulate is to say that the energetic map of my body, my soul self, or the way that my soul takes shape in the world of the 3D, is modeled on the map of the divine. And for Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic tree of life, it's a ladder that's meant to connect us, connect heaven and earth, and we are the conscious awareness that is the joining of the two, which is why these two miracles that we find in Parashat Chukat work so nicely. Because if we were to go into the energetic map of the body, I would say to you that the aspect of you that is Keter, your crown, if for those of us who are more familiar with the Hindu chakra system, also called crown, that this part of you has never left God, is plugged in, it's even above the terrain of those clouds that were given in honor of Aaron. And likewise, too, that Shekhinah or Malchut, the lowest Sphira, is the terrain of planet Earth. And so that we also, just like trees, have roots that sink deep into quote unquote the earth. And literally, I believe that it's possible, and that it can be so profoundly nourishing. We have the ability to draw down resourcing from above and from below, and different ways work better for different those of us, each of us. But that it can help. And now, of course, the place that we didn't really get to in the teaching today, in the Parsha, both Moses and Aaron die. And so in that moment, there's a feeling of panic and, oh my God, what happened to my resourcing? And also some of us might feel that about leadership right now. There's some of us who have very strong emotional reactions, for example, to the votes that were happening in the Senate and the House in the last few days. And that relates specifically to the healing professions, right? Like this is where our anxiety is. But that's where a practice like this becomes so essential. The resourcing is there, even when, for example, the inspirational figure or the leader that helped me learn how to draw resourcing from the well or from the clouds, even when that person isn't there, or even when our leaders are failing us, the resourcing is still there. It just becomes incumbent upon us to go to the source, so to speak.
Such a beautiful teaching. I read a book a number of years ago by a Tibetan teacher. I believe it was Lama Yeshe.
Mm.
And the name of the book is Becoming Your Own Therapist, right? So I love how
Exactly.
you're kind of guiding us toward becoming our own healers, right?
Yes.
Because the resource is there and we're connected to it, but we need to, in some ways, open the channel, right? And facilitate our capacity to actually take it into ourselves and be nourished by it.
And not become paralyzed by fear. When you were summarizing so beautifully, that comfort zone of the uncomfortable but predictable, it's just there are so many moments in our lives that we choose that we feel both shackled and choosing to stay right here because better the devil you know. And so learning to, then that's where I think that doing this work within a faith-based context, faith can so often be the difference, right? That when we feel joined, supported, I can have faith, then I can learn to feel comfortable in the wilderness, not terrified.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So we do have a question here from Ricky. Could you speak specifically to what this or other Jewish practices say specifically regarding fear and helplessness? I don't often feel these as deeply as I do now.
Hmm. I think, Ricky, that I understood your question, just that last clause that right now in this time in the world, you're feeling a sense of fear of health and helplessness that's more prevalent than maybe you've felt in other times in your life. So, I think that we're living through a time of tremendous upheaval. I can say that as both an Israeli and an American. This is a profoundly generative time and also destabilizing time. And that's just here we are. We're the ones who get to be alive right now, for better, for worse. It must be us who are resourced to do it. In terms of Jewish languaging around dealing with fear, so there's a lot. There's a lot. There's a bunch of um, Awakened Body resources on Insight Timer. So if you search for Awakened Body on Insight Timer, there's a course on there called The Dark Side, which is a reference to the Kabbalistic idea of the Sitra Achra, and it has there's that's like a specific prepackaged thing that you can go and check out. That's a concrete answer to your question. But what I would say just on one foot is that, reverence, which the literal translation of the Hebrew word that I like to call reverence is fear, right? Reverence, a sense of awe in our traditional Jewish sources, is a path to cultivating a relationship with divinity. And so, I think that the people who do that best, in our the last 2,000 years of history are the architects of these, very traditional Gothic churches where you go in and there you have these very vaulted ceilings that give you a felt sense of our own smallness, but that calls us upward towards a sense of potential. So all of that is to say that there are ways of working with fear that help us reground into our own sense of humility. And and what I would say about that is that, just as I was saying a minute ago, faith becomes the key. And this is something that I think is hard for us in the shadow of, we all live in the shadow of the Holocaust. We're all living at a time where it's very complicated to be a Jew. And so it takes some good work to to figure out the right balance of these factors. But I think that to put it concisely, Judaism would say that by grounding in faith, by centering in faith, we can work with all of it, but including even a sense of fear, which we're encouraged to relate to not as terror, but rather as reverence, right? But it's a big question, big topic.
Yeah, huge question. Here's a question from Joanne. How do you recommend we find a chavruta with someone who shares this meditation practice with, in caps, the Judaic learning that informs it? And Joanne, what I'm hearing there perhaps is that often we may find these kinds of meditation practices, beyond the Jewish community, let's say in Buddhist or Hindu or other kinds of settings, perhaps Sufi or Advaita Vedanta or whatever the case may be. And what's unique, I think, about IJS from day one is that we've really tried to source these practices directly from within the Jewish tradition, grounded in Jewish sources. So perhaps you can say a little bit more about that.
Well, I can, but I kind of think, Sam, it's a request for you all at IJS. I mean, I think this is a request for a Chavruta matching program, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, but I find it so moving when I have the ability to log on and to be part of the sit. That here we are. We stop in the middle of our day, and there's 200 Jews from all around the planet who are choosing to do this. So the people are out there. For my work. Um, we awakened body courses are beautiful. It's like this work, it does happen. It happens when you dive in, but I think it happens a lot at IJS too. So
That's true. And I'll also say that if folks sign up for any of our online courses or our long-term cohort programs, right, they all have a Chavruta component. You can actually find a Chavruta practice partner and meet on a regular basis to share what's going on in your practice and kind of bear witness to one another and hold each other, non-judgmentally, compassionately, lovingly, which is such a big help in this work because it can feel isolating sometimes. It can feel
yes,
going against the grain of the whole kind of trajectory and energy of the world, in fact. So it is
yes.
important to have spiritual friends in this work.
Amen.
Well, we're coming up on time here, Sara, and I just really want to thank you for your clarity and your heartfulness and the way in which the teaching just flows so organically from your own personal practice and experience. And I know that you're in the US now with your children, and I pray that when it's time to get back to Israel, that they'll be able to return in safety, security, and well-being. And in the meantime, thank you so much for being our teacher and our guide today. And we'll
Such
really,
an honor and a pleasure. Wonderful to be with you all. Thank you.
yeah, we'll look forward to having you back soon. Okay. All right, friends,
Great.
we're going to be meeting tomorrow. You can always go to our YouTube channel and do a reprise of today's practice or any of the other practices you may have enjoyed or benefited from over the last number of weeks or months or even years. And we'll look forward to regrouping again on Monday. So happy July 4th to those who are celebrating, and may all of us be well, happy, and peaceful. Take good care.